also addressing the root cause of dadka gaaban dhibkaasay qabaan. waxaan rabaa inaan mahadnaq ballaaran oo kal iyo laaba u soo jeediyo marti sharafta maanta ka soo qayb gashay meeshan, khaasatan oday dhaqameedyada waxgaradka iyo cuqaasha jaaliyadda Soomaaliyeed ee magaalada Minneapolis. in yaroo guud mar ah kulankeenan maanta waa kalfadhi aqooneedkii sanadlaha ahaa ee uga barateen IHASA معهد علمي باريستا يدرسين تاريخ جيسك أفريقيا. ساد أوكتين هذا هو معهد لغو وانقل علمي باريس أما أقون فاجس يدرسين تاريخ جودة جيسك أفريقيا وين أجنه هي هردن كأفكارات كتير مانتا إن جيسك أفريقيا ومعهد إذن كارنتي لفدبر وها وقرب تاجنا إلا يمالك يوه الرئيسي لكن ندانس حسوس إنه إن هرال كيسة يهملدي سوى ما واحد فيجن يمشين ليراه ay tahay in dib u eegis lagu sameeyo taxanaha ama sooyaalka taariikheed ee mujtamaca ku dhaqan mandiqada Geeska Afrika iyadoo marka la tixgelinayo waaqica ay bulshadaas marayso la islana rogrogayo maraaxisha kala duwan ee zamanku keenayo isla markaana la higsanayo himilo ah sidii nabad loogu soo dabaali lahaa Geeska Afrika. waxaan runtii idiga mahadcelinaynaa dulqaadkiina waynu sognahay bulsho ahaan Soomaali waqtiga runtii waxaad moodaa waa ceebayna wada leenahay ilaahay naga koriyo aad uma ilaalino waxoogaana waxaad moodaa mar walba inaan aanan dhaamin sidii hore. marka waxaan jeclahay inaan nafteeda xusuusiyo idinkaba in barnaamijyada soo socda aan ma aragtay aad u ilaalino kaliya in yaroo dana ma aragtay panelistku waxay ka hadlayeen waxay ahayd in la rogrogo arrimaha Geeska Afrika ka jira qodobadii u muhiimsanaa waqtiga nagu yar waxay ahayd dib u dhisidda mujtamacii Soomaaliyeed ee kala abaaday iyada oo taariikhda laga run sheegayo. inta badan taariikhda waa la mawladuga ama waa la marin habaabiya. qaybta labaadna waxay ahayd aragtida dawladeed iyo waxa la oran karo dib u yagleelid hay-adihii Soomaaliyeed waaxaha khaaska waaxaha dawladeed iyo dhammaantood runtii waqtiga dartii ma soo koobi karno dhammaan afkaartii ay marti sharafta culus ee nala joogta ay soo bandhigeen iyo qodobkii u dambeeyay oo ahaa ammaanka iyo horumarka inay labadaasi mar walba saamikal quman isku yihiin direct proportion oo kan haddii la waayo ammaan la'aan aan horumar aan jiraynin iyadoo marka again ay isla qeexeen dhibka ka jira Geeska Afrika meesha uu ka yimid saameynta dhaqaale siyaasi mujtamac uu ku leeyahay mandiqada Geeska Afrika iyo ma aragtay wixii marka ay xal iyagu arkayeen afkaartoodii ku dhisnayd aragtida tacliimeed. waxaan jecelahay inaan isxusuusino panelka kale ee soo socda runtii waa panel culus waxaana la jooga marti sharaf culus David Shin waxaanan bixin doonaa oo kale abaal marin ama aqoonsi oo jecelahay inaad qayb ka ahaataan. marka fadlan waxaan mar kale isxusuusinaynaa in aan ilaalino hanaan socodka barnaamijkan waad mahadsantihiin idigu dheeraan maayo. haddana waxaan ku soo dhameynayaa حمزة حاجي محمد ونمر إنه ماشي كده وياي سي برنامج أنت كهدي وإنه قد عدي يوم هسنتين.
دلقات كاد موجسين it's never easy إلا في اليوميل ماركتي وحالي دتك عرورت attention span code وإلى 5 دقيقة دتك وين وشنو 8 دقيقة مركا آد بعد كربة ضفتين ماركتي حلي attention span كيها مركا أنا إنه ده دهين دونا panel كان waxaa sharaf inoo ah inay nagala soo qayb galeen safiirka David Shin oo safiirkii dawladda Mareykanka u joogay Ethiopia 96 ilaa 99kii intii ka horeysayna arrimaha Soomaaliya u qaabilsanaa xilligii abaartii 93 iyo 94 Fawziya waad wada garanaysaan horey bay dhowr jeer maaragtay nagala soo qayb qaadatay hawlaheenii hore. Cecilia iyo Orlin waxay ka socdaan Oslo Peace Center. Oslo Peace Center waxay leedahay local office oo Oslo Peace Foundation. Orlin wuxuu kaloo mas'uul ka yahay organization la yiraahdo Partnership for Change. Marka Orlin will give us about 5 minutes introduction about his organization and then we'll proceed with Celia and then to Fawzia and finally we will conclude with Ambassador David Shin. So without further ado, welcome Orlin.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I first want to thank Patrick and IHASA for considering the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights for this conference and for inviting me to participate today. I am not Somali. I am Norwegian American, and I know that many of you are Somali American, and in just a few minutes I'm going to introduce a Korean Swede. But I think we're all citizens of the world. We can all consider ourselves citizens of the world, and we're all here today to work on the promise of a new Somalia. In preparing my remarks for tonight, I realized, it occurred to me that although I began working with Prime Minister Bondevik of Norway in March 2007, that it was in October 2008 that I was appointed to my current position, Executive Director of the Oslo Center U.S. Foundation. So this month marks my 5th anniversary in this position, and also in my 5th and last career. The Oslo Center is an independent and highly professional, politically relevant center that provides advice, exerts influence, and creates meeting places for conflict prevention, dialogue, and strengthening of responsible leadership. The unique position of Norway as a small nation and of the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights, led by former Prime Minister Bondevik, makes it possible on behalf of the citizens of the world to do what many world leaders cannot do. Prime Minister Bondevik and his teams can go to places where others cannot. They can speak to those whom others cannot reach. They can serve as facilitators and help build multi-party democracies in some of the most dangerous places in the world. And they can serve as neutral, trusted peacemakers in places where the distrust of the West is a barrier to peacemaking. That has been the long tradition of Norwegian leadership in peace brokering, from Trygve Lie, the first Secretary General of the United Nations, to Kjell Magne Bondevik today. The Oslo Center U.S. Foundation supports the Oslo Center in the form of value-added local to global programs and developing funding sources for capacity building of the Oslo Center. During the past 5 years, we have built relationships with governments, with non-government organizations, universities, community organizations, and foundations, which serve as collaborative partners for both the Oslo Center in Norway and the Oslo Center U.S. Foundation here. The Oslo Center U.S. Foundation's first foray into working with the Somali diaspora began in October 2010 in a program called Peace Begins at Home, the Case for Dialogue and Leadership Development in the Somali Diaspora in Minnesota and Norway. In presenting the project in October 2010, I stated, "When marriages fail, families and friendships splinter. When a nation-state fails, the resultant factions threaten the entire international community. This has been the story of Somalia in recent decades after the government collapsed and warlords and sectarian political entrepreneurs filled the void. The fabric of daily life unraveled and hundreds and thousands died or fled. In the Somali diaspora, the violence they fled haunts the refugees today, up to 40,000 at that time in Minnesota in 2010, as they attempt to establish new lives. Meanwhile, in Somalia, the struggle to establish a legitimate government has spawned new tensions and awakened international concerns. That was then, 2010. Since 2006, the Oslo Center has worked tirelessly in the Horn of Africa, specifically Kenya, South Sudan, and in Somalia, to facilitate dialogue, assist with support for the fragile democracies there, and in preparing for fair, open, transparent elections. Beginning with our project, Dialogue and Leadership Development in the Somali Diaspora in Minnesota and Norway in 2010, the Oslo Center U.S. Foundation has hosted countless diaspora visits to Minnesota and between Minnesota and Scandinavia, and worked to bridge the diaspora between other diaspora units both in the United States and in Europe. We also helped to spawn the Norway-Somalia Bridge and the Somali Youth Summit, held respectively in Oslo and in Stockholm the last 2 years. and the next Somali Youth Summit will be held in Denmark in 2014. As tensions seem to ease in Somalia following the famine and the gains made in stabilizing Mogadishu and much of the rest of the country, the Oslo Center U.S. Foundation began focusing our attention in other places in the world where the Oslo Center is engaged. However, after the terrible Westgate Mall tragedy in Kenya last month, and requests for assistance began coming from both Washington, D.C., Oslo, and other organizations earlier this month, our board of directors directed us to re-engage with the Somali diaspora once again and increase our support for the Oslo Center's work in Somalia. In a visit to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of October, I met with the leadership of the Education Development Center. Their home offices are in Boston, but they have a large office in Washington, D.C., and also with the McCain Institute. Both offered to partner with us in developing specific projects that will support engagement of the diaspora directly with projects in Somalia. We are exploring ideas and welcome your thoughts and suggestions in addressing what you and others in the diaspora deem to be the most pressing challenges in the continued development of Somalia. Within our capacity, we pledge to do all we can to support the work of the Oslo Center and others who are engaged in both arenas. Regarding today's agenda, as I said in my opening remarks, I was very honored to be invited to participate today. At the same time, I realized that the Oslo Center should participate with a depth of knowledge that I don't possess. Therefore, I'm extremely grateful that Mr. Bondevik has sent the Oslo Center Program Manager for Democracy Assistance for my support and yours. Cecilia Bielischer has over 15 years of experience working in democracy assistance programs. She is currently assisting in establishing an Oslo Center office in Mogadishu, and she herself spends 1 week per month working directly with government leaders in Mogadishu. Cecilia represents Oslo Center's boots on the ground effort in the Horn of Africa. She has previously worked with the National Democratic Institute in Washington, D.C., but in Somalia, the Carter Center, and International IDEA in Sweden. As a citizen of the world, born South Korean, raised in Sweden with Swedish parents, and now working with Somalia and in Somalia for a Norwegian organization, she brings a valuable perspective to the Oslo Center's important work and to this conference. I proudly and gladly turn over representation of the Oslo Center to Cecilia. Thank you very much.
I'm honored to be here with you today. It's been interesting to sit in and to listen to your discussion and the way that you have elaborated on the different topics. Thank you, Orlin, for a very nice introduction. As Orlin mentioned, I'm just back from Somalia and Mogadishu, where we are doing programs with the government and with the aspiring political parties, and also the parliament, of course. I've been asked to present on the Oslo Center's work in Somalia, so I will focus a lot of attention on that. But I understand we have a short time frame, so I will try to keep it short. But to begin, as Orlin said, the Oslo Center is a non-partisan democratic center established in 2006 by former Prime Minister Mr. Bondevik. We have our headquarters in Oslo, but we are now establishing a field office, our first field office in Mogadishu. We are soon to also establish offices in other regions we are working, including Kenya, South Sudan, and Burma. But Somalia, the program, has been very much the pilot program for us, where a lot of focus within our organization has been put. The baseline for the Oslo Center program is that we would want to work in fragile democracies to build institutions and to support the establishment and realization of democratic processes. We work with a methodology mainly in terms of dialogue. we are trying to be the facilitator to open up dialogue, not only between groups, but also within groups. We have, as Orlin mentioned, the privilege of having access to different levels of politics. We have access to the highest level through our leader, but we also have access through other institutions and our technical program staff. We think of programs as holistic in that sense that we are not trying to work in all different fields with all different themes, but rather we are focusing on a specific area that we find that we have the capacity to contribute and support. And in the case of Somalia, that has been the political party system. That has been one of the main areas that we have focused attention. So let me just go into the program that we are implementing in Somalia. It has really increased our ability to work in Mogadishu and in Somalia the last 12 months. We work both with the parliament in terms of a secondment program, where we are trying to we are giving the funds to the speaker and the speaker's office, and they are, together with deputy speakers and committee chairs, identifying the needs. And they are identifying the terms of reference for the people that they would like to see hired. They are also hiring and firing the people that are seconded to the different committees. This is, of course, something that is very new. It's a new way of interacting and dealing with government institutions. But for us, it has been a great experience to be able to be part of this process, but also to be able to be a facilitator for dialogue rather than the driver of change. We have also been involved in the discussion on multi-party system, as that is our main focus. This has been both to be part of the constitutional process, giving suggestion and advice in terms of the multi-party system, but it has also been a direct work with the aspiring political parties. As you know, there is no legislation or way of registering political parties today, but these groups have a clear interest in building parties, and we saw that as a great opportunity to engage with these groups at an early stage to see whether or not democratic processes are of interest, if it's a way that they could entrench certain ways of making decisions that is facilitating the group of people that they are representing to provide inclusiveness and participation. And this has been a very exciting project that has been going on for the last 2 years. And it has resulted in both that the group all political parties have united and they meet on a regular basis, but also that they have come up with recommendations in terms of legislation for political parties or multi-party system. They have come together and recommended a two-step approach to the registration, where a temporary registration is the first step, and with a later permanent registration closer to the election. I think this has been very exciting for all of us, and we have learned a lot through that work. I will try to. This is one of the things that I talked about before, the mini version of the New Deal. I have heard different things during the conference, which I appreciate and take note of. What we have tried to do is that we have tried to build trust for the institution, and to build trust by letting the institution own the process, and in that sense creating the responsible part, the reporting part, and who people refer to when they say that they are working for the parliament and not the Oslo Center. So it has been a very important part in what we are doing as an institution. So this could be seen as a mini version of what we are expecting from the New Deal later on. The examples of program impact is always hard, as you all know, to measure the impact of support like this. It's hard to count and it's hard to qualify. But it's, what we have seen is that the technical advisors, they are all Somalis. They share that they are all Somalis, but they have different background. They might be from the diaspora, they might have stayed throughout the war in Somalia. They have different professions. Many of them are lawyers, economists, administrators, and so forth. So they have contributed with their specific expertise to the work that the committees have been doing in Parliament. It was a crucial time when the Parliament committees were set up. It was important to discuss how a committee would function, what they would do, what role they would play, how they would interact between each other, and also how their interaction with the speaker and the government would look like. And this was some of the things that the technical advisors helped or assisted in establishing a process of. Of course, we have ongoing challenges in Somalia, and coming just from there, the discussion about the recent development in Kenya and the attack against the Westgate Mall was, of course, something that was discussed and of concern. It has, of course, created tensions between Kenyans or with the Somali diaspora living in Kenya. But we are hoping that this discussion will be broader than only related to ISLI in Nairobi, that this will be something that we can address as members of an international community. I would also say, just as a note to previous speakers, that the Jubaland issue is, of course, still very sensitive, and I think that there is an interest of finding a middle way where the 6 regions that are now trying to create a stage will be called for a conference where these issues will be discussed thoroughly. And I think this is also one of the new ways that the government is trying to reach out to the public to discuss issues in plenum. I can also see that the realization of federalism is there, and the committee that is working on the federal state structure, they are kicking off their public consultation next week. So they have an outreach program in the areas where you can access to discuss with people what they expect from the Constitution, what they expect from a federal state structure, how they would like to see power divided and so forth. So that is also one initiative that we might want to take note of. This is only a slide to kind of showcase the different support mechanisms that are put in play now, and a lot of things are going on at the same time. We have the Vision 2016, that is the outcome of the President's last conference, that is clearly saying that they will support election in 2016 in September. This was a conference that was conducted in Mogadishu and attended by people invited from different parts of society. We also have the 6-month plan for Parliament that addresses the need of establishing independent commissions, both the Election Commission as well as the Constitutional Commission. So that is also ongoing. We had the IGAD Forum, Partners Forum, the ministerial meeting. We have the special financial facility that is backed by Norway. the Global Fund and the Somali Development and Reconstruction Facility, and then of course what we all know, the New Deal Compact that is awaiting. It's still hard to see how all of these initiatives are going to come externally as well to support. For the Oslo Center's future programming, we are going to continue with the secondment program, but we are going to also extend that program to involve the government. We see a need to bridge the gap in the legislative process between the government, parliament, and the people. So to be able to do that, we are hoping that we could contribute to facilitating for technical advisors in all these different levels to smoothen that process, so bills are not drafted and sent to Parliament.
I would like to thank Hamza and the Minneapolis team for putting yet another successful IHASA conference. And the focus this year is on Somalia, and 1 day instead of 2 days. But I really would like to say thank you for inviting us again. And yes, it's important to create these platforms where we share knowledge and exchange ideas. My topic today is under the panel on security, but I know that Ambassador Shane is going to really be the real expert when it comes to security in the region. What I would like to do, though, is help us to think a little bit outside of the box when it comes to security, and take you into sort of like the context of the broader context of human security, not just security in the military sense. And for those of you who are in universities and whatnot, you would know that there is an entire security studies. Now I think people are getting degrees and specializing in security studies, just like peace studies. But security studies has been identified as a subfield of international relations closely related to the end of Second World War and the Cold War and the era of the Cold War. And in that conversations, when you think about security in the context of coming out of the world wars and during the Cold War, security was very much state-centered. It was the state's ability to be able to defend itself from other states. What that means is building military machinery. And you all remember during the Cold War, the arms race, right? I mean, going back to the 60s and the nuclear and even John F. Kennedy here in the US. So there is very much a security that was centering on the state's military capabilities to defend itself, the state's military capabilities to go in alliances with, things like NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Security sort of in that international relations and as a subfield of international relations and the Cold War and security studies discourses came out of that. So when you really think about the importance of security, you also need to kind of link it to how critical it becomes, security becomes for governance and economic development. So as such then, it is critical for rebuilding states like Somalia. So here, I'm trying to sort of go to that abstract notions in the literature and bring it back to Somalia. So as the various states, and I'm glad Cecilia was talking about, supporting the legislative kind of responsible groups in building their capacity in supporting them. What I would like to, though, really contend here is to broaden our thinking and broaden it into the overarching human security, which encompasses governance, economics, health, physical, communal health, political security, all those things, and think at a population level. I work in a public health department in Ottawa, and we very much utilize the framework of population health or doing an intervention at the population level. So that is what I would like us to think about as we think about security. and rethinking security studies, but also rethinking it in the sense that security, the impact or the results of security then become the indicators of public policy. What happens in the realm of public policy and the results of that public policy debate in kind of broadening the thing is increasing the concerns of, at that table when you're sitting at the public policy decision making, what are the trade-offs, right? And then we go back to another old debate that talks about what the literature terms as, security and public policy, butter versus guns. As a government, do you invest in the guns? Do you invest in social welfare? So the security kind of debate goes in that, so guns and butter, and those of us who are in the left of things would say, let's go with the butter and not the guns. So I just want to declare my bias here. That's my social policy debate, what I'm engaging. I'm engaging in looking at more spendings in health, more spendings in public housing, more spendings in those things as opposed to building more missiles. So now let's kind of take security, if it's critical, even in the societies that we live in, and human security at that is critical. What is happening in the Somali context? And I'm glad that Abdulrazak Warfa talked about post-conflict and what needs to happen. There is still, I think, we're still not out of the woods when it comes to conflict. I don't think Somalia can be said today we are a post-conflict. We want to be a post-conflict society, but I think we have a way to go. What we are struggling with still is what the literature terms peacemaking. How can we make peace? We just avoided another war between the Juba administration and the federal government leadership. So we are like one step forward, 2 steps backward. So we're sort of, let's make peace. Let's come together and make peace. But the journey of peace building, of which really reconciliation is a critical component. It's just one component. There's a long journey of peace building. I don't think we started yet that. So we are in a stage where we are, forget about peace building. We are actually enforcing peace in Somalia. We have 17,000 African Union military bodies, boots on the ground, trying to keep peace that is not there. Let's be honest with each other. Somalis did not make peace yet. Those 17,000 African Union troops are there to keep from Somali men, whether they are in the Al-Shabaab camp or the other camp, from fighting and fighting at each other. So peacekeeping in our context is now becoming peace enforcing. What does that mean? When I am thinking about human security and the welfare of the population, when you are enforcing peace, you're basically giving peacekeepers the license to shoot back. And the casualty is, again, the masses in the population. So when you look at those things, and I really admire the international community kind of pushing and groups like the Oslo Peace Center doing what they're doing, at the end of the day, Al-Shabaab is still undermining everything in Mogadishu and everywhere else. I was looking at a parade of Al-Shabaab in Bulapurti the other day. As soon as the Juba peace was signed, there was Al-Shabaab showing their forces in somewhere in Barawe. So there is a large south central areas that are still away from peacemaking, forget about peace building. So that is the context we want to kind of keep in mind as I kind of further talk about the peace, human security. So as I said, the concept of human security includes the wider population's well-being. So it becomes people-centered security. It doesn't become state-centered, where the state builds military wings and whatnot, but it becomes a people-centered. So when you think about also before, it was interstate conflicts that were being avoided by building the military wings. What we're dealing with now is intra-state, within Somalia, within, states. But think about what that does to the health of the population, what that does to the economic well-being of the population, what that does and what it means for somebody to have at a very individual or communal level a security. Security does not about having more guns. So the human security concept, as I said, emerged also out of the UN Development Program. What is in its essence means, in its broader definition term, freedom from fear and want. Very encompassing, broad thing, and it's really ambitious. But it's not something that is only in the Western literature. I just want to take a minute and remind you that even security from, freedom from fear and want is mentioned in our Holy Quran as well, in Surah Al-Ilaf, when there is a phrase that says, آمنهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. It's very important as you consider human security. It's tackling poverty and tackling that fear from somebody who's attacking you, but the economic abject poverty our people were in the last 20 years kind of speaks to something. And it's very interesting when you dig a little bit deeper into the literature. Gary King and Christopher Murray talk about it in the terms of really tackling what is being termed as generalized poverty. So when you consider the WHO and the public health arena, you talk about the broader determinants of health. That somebody's health is not simply the absence of disease. The amount of resource, the kind of job you have, how much control you have over your daily living and how you make your living impacts your health. And when somebody poor smokes versus somebody rich smokes, they don't end up with the same health consequences. So the broader determinants of health come into that human security. But I like what King and Murray talk about when they talk about tackling a generalized poverty. And I quote, generalized poverty occurs when an individual falls below the threshold of any key domain of human well-being. So the overall human development indices, right? When an individual falls, when an entire population falls below that, you can only imagine, which is what we are dealing with in the context of Somalia. So human security, try and hurry up. It has an interdependence sort of components. So acknowledging the growing permeability of national borders. So human security in one nation state or within one nation state can become, can have impact on. And the last 23 years, the international community is trying to contain the Somali situation within Somalia. And I think that is what is happening, is like, but it's not, I don't know how it's working, because there are refugees. There are also Al-Shabaab phenomena happening, if Westgate, what has happened in Westgate and what has been happening in the Garissa NFD area, we definitely are not going to keep or be able to contain the violence and the conflict in Somalia. We have seen it. Hence, we have the terms such as, when is the world going to see Somalia that is at peace with itself and with its neighbors? So we need to kind of think a little bit broader than that containment policy, though. It's not just containing, it's really looking at it as how, in the global sense, we are all interconnected and interdependent. So the importance of prevention then is emphasized in those human security literature. Given the current era of global fiscal restraint, it is going to be less costly to deal with threats to human security through early prevention rather than later intervention. And here is one concrete example. For example, in 1996 in Somalia, the cost of peacekeeping, I'm talking about 1996. Now we have So much, I don't know even what the number is. The cost of peacekeeping was 350 million, while only 27 million was spent on aid. So we need to kind of think broader than more boots on the ground, meaning security. It is not. It's more expensive to sustain and maintain. One last point before you kind of kick me out, and that is, I just want to mention the gender aspect, right? So there is a gender element to this debate as well, and I read people like Carol Cohen and Cynthia Enelo and people I'm sure that Havon is very familiar with, and they're saying we need to put genuine intellectual curiosity to understand that center humanity. That is difficult in some situations, but when you even look at within the society, how are the women faring? How are the women and children faring in that society? That broader human security piece is going to also reach there, and I'm going to stop there before I'm really.
So I have the unenviable task of keeping you all awake in the waning minutes of this conference. I will do my best, and I have some things to throw out in the audience if I see anyone dozing off. I will talk about the origin, development, and the future of the African Union mission in Somalia, better known as AMISOM. By way of background, in 2006, and most of you will recall this, the Islamic courts controlled Mogadishu and virtually all of South and Central Somalia. While they had some highly controversial policies, they did reestablish authority in the regions that they governed, and many Somalis welcomed that stability. The Transitional National Government of Somalia, operating out of Nairobi, and neighboring Ethiopia, which had troops inside the Somali border and especially in Baidoa, perceived the Islamic courts as a threat. At the end of 2006, the Islamic courts militia made the mistake of attacking the Ethiopian forces in Baidoa, suffering a major defeat. Ethiopian forces, encouraged by the Somali transitional government, then marched to Mogadishu and forced the leaders of the Islamic courts to flee to the southern end of Somalia. Now, the presence of Ethiopian forces in Mogadishu was deeply resented by Somalis. Their presence gave Somali Islamist elements, and especially the new organization known as Al-Shabaab, a rallying cry for removing the Ethiopians. This posed a dilemma for the TNG, which did not have a security force capable of confronting Al-Shabaab, and the Ethiopians, who had a strong force but were deeply resented by Somalis. Normally, this would be an occasion for establishing a UN peacekeeping operation. But frankly, the UN refused to get involved. This left the problem to the African Union, which agreed to send a force that became known as AMISOM to Somalia in support of the transitional national government. The force was slow to stand up. Initially, only Ugandan troops volunteered for the operation, subsequently joined by a contingent from Burundi. The idea was to replace the much stronger Ethiopian force, which was drawing the ire of many Somalis. The Ethiopian force actually did the heavy lifting in combating Al-Shabaab in Mogadishu. In the meantime, Al-Shabaab was consolidating power in the rest of South and Central Somalia. The Ethiopian force finally pulled out of Somalia in January of 2009, leaving AMISOM in control of about 40% of Mogadishu and nothing else, with Al-Shabaab controlling the rest of Mogadishu in addition to most of South and Central Somalia. AMISOM slowly increased its numbers, eventually adding troop contingents from Djibouti and Sierra Leone. There were also improvements in the Somali government security forces, not big improvements, but small improvements. For its part, Al-Shabaab alienated many Somalis with its strict interpretation of Sharia and the use of suicide bombings against innocent Somalis. By 2011, AMISOM and Somali government security forces pushed Al-Shabaab out of the greater Mogadishu area. Also in 2011, Kenya military forces, following Al-Shabaab attacks on foreign tourists and aid personnel inside Kenya, entered Jubaland as an independent force to rid the area of Al-Shabaab. Now, this force struggled in the beginning, but aligned with the Ras Kamboni militia, eventually seized the key port city of Kismayo and most other key towns in Jubaland. The Kenyan force subsequently officially became part of AMISOM. In 2012, Ethiopian forces, which had crossed back into Somalia the previous year, successfully handed over Baidoa to AMISOM's Burundi forces and Beledweyne to AMISOM's Djiboutian contingent. From the beginning, Ethiopia wanted to maintain command and control over its forces and never put them under the authority of AMISOM. Since these military successes by AMISOM and the Somali National Army, there has been a military stalemate with al-Shabaab, which continues to hold much of rural South and Central Somalia and a couple of key towns. Today, AMISOM has just fewer than 18,000 uniformed personnel, including police, in Somalia. Troops from Uganda, Burundi, Djibouti, Sierra Leone, and Kenya are deployed in 4 sectors in South and Central Somalia. Ugandan and Burundian troops are located in Benadir, Lower and Middle Shebele, and parts of Bay and Bakul. Kenyan forces are in Gedo, Lower and Middle Juba, and troops from Sierra Leone are going to join them. Djiboutian forces are in Haran. AMISOM also works closely with government-affiliated militias, instructing them when and where to report for military operations, but does so outside any formal organizational structure. The AMISOM police force is training a Somali police force of 5,000. AMISOM has 363 police officers from Nigeria, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Gambia. AMISOM conducts limited maritime operations to act as a vessel security for AMISOM supply and also to ensure the security of the shoreline around Mogadishu. The European Union is training the small AMISOM naval unit. AMISOM does not directly take part in humanitarian operations, but facilitates the efforts of international humanitarian agencies and NGOs by providing security for their operations. AMISOM field hospitals do treat the civilian population, although their priority is deployed troops. AMISOM also has a civilian political, developmental, and public information role. The political unit is responsible for the implementation of political decisions on Somalia taken by the African Union. AMISOM and the international community face some hard decisions. The military stalemate continues, and time may work in favor of al-Shabaab if the Somali federal government and the new Somali National Army are unable to win the confidence of most Somalis and establish security in the country using Somali security forces. For the time being, the SFG remains dependent on AMISOM for its survival. Al-Shabaab, according to the UN Monitoring Group on Somalia, in its latest report in July of this year, says that that Al-Shabaab has an estimated 5,000 troops under arms at the moment, at least 300 of whom are foreign jihadis. They are avoiding direct confrontation with AMISOM and Somali National Army forces in order to minimize their casualties. They do conduct suicide bombings, a significant number of IED attacks, and occasional small ambushes against AMISOM. But they are avoiding major conflict and biding their time. In the meantime, they conducted the dramatic terrorist attack against innocent Kenyans at the unprotected Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi. Al-Shabaab has stockpiled arms throughout central and southern Somalia, waiting for AMISOM to leave when it will then attack the SNA and allied forces. AMISOM and the SFG need to use this period to break the current stalemate. While Al-Shabaab cannot defeat AMISOM, it can wait out their presence in Somalia. It is critical for the SFG to build its own loyal security force and, equally important, begin providing normal services such as health care and education for the Somali population. While AMISOM has accomplished a great deal since 2011, it also presents challenges for defeating al-Shabaab and restoring a viable Somali government. Al-Shabaab uses the presence of non-Somali troops in Somalia to recruit disaffected Somalis. As long as AMISOM has a presence in Somalia, this will remain a problem. Of course, al-Shabaab tries to hide the existence of its foreign jihadi contingent. Even since 2011, when AMISOM forced al-Shabaab out of Mogadishu and most key towns in south and central Somalia, challenges have continued. AMISOM's relations with the SFG continue to be strained. Progress in building Somali security and intelligence services has been excruciatingly slow. AMISOM has received criticism for failing to protect Somali civilians. The UN Monitoring Group concluded that AMISOM control over the Kenyan Defense Forces, the KDF, in Jubaland has been more theoretical than practical. The KDF commander in Kismayo has denied permission to some Somali federal government officials to visit the city and flouted instructions from President Hassan Sheikh to halt the charcoal trade. Kenyan forces, together with the Ras Kamboni militia, have not only continued but expanded the illegal export of charcoal from Kismayo. Even worse, individuals linked to al-Shabaab have exported 32% of the charcoal consignments since November of 2012. Al-Shabaab continues to earn an estimated $25 million annually in exports from Kismayo, Barawe, and from taxes that they impose on charcoal dealers on the land. In 2013, when Ethiopian forces left Hudur town in Bakul region, Somali government forces and allied militias also left. Al-Shabaab immediately
in the field of political party system. So I can see your point. I totally agree that a top-down approach is not the approach to take, and I apologize if I have if I wasn't clear in my presentation. The way that we see it is that we have access to different levels, and we are able to contribute with support. But we don't, as an international organization, we are not providing support directly. We rather would like to see support being provided by Somalis to Somalis to make that link fairly clear. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but we are not. Yeah.
That you go back 40 years and listen to the entire, for instance, the Dar es Salaam School of Thought. There's a rich literature of how top-down didn't work at African levels.
Institute. Is it possible to deal with the other regions like Puntland and Somaliland and Juba administration or other incoming federal institutions? Because it's very important. They need, the centers you are establishing in Mogadishu and Kismayo needs, Puntland needs. And that way you guys can develop, the peace, and everywhere in Somalia needs democracy. So what I would say is, don't put all your eggs in one basket sitting in Mogadishu. So that the regions can benefit that. My other question is to Ambassador David Sheen, and thank you very much, the background information you have given us. And also, part of the problem is the international community. You well said in your presentation, you gave us the historical fact about the European Islamic Court. And also, there was what they call alliance for terrorism or something like that. They, irritated with some innocent people has been taken to Djibouti, and also they get money from the CIA, or I'm not sure, but that's what I heard. I cannot verify, So what I would say, Somalia, international community, they have to support our government. It's a very important. Also, international community, they have to work with the government to implement the federal constitution.
Thank you, Mohammed.
And they have to support with that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
So what we'll do in interest.
One question for Fausia and then one question for the ambassador. Fausia, I like how you had theoretical background for the security, but the question is how do we make that practical? How do we move from theory to practice? For Ambassador, I like the background you provided, but I was, maybe I'll better word from Faisal. I was a little bit troubled, your description of the Kismayo issue as one in which KDF is in bed with West Cambodian militia. I think that is a different interpretation than what most of us would probably say is the case. Chuba administration is not, the Kismayo is not a militia. I think they represent the will of the Chuba, Gero, lower and middle Chuba Gero regions desires. If KDF is functioning outside the Amazon function, so is Ethiopia. So why should we put the focus on KDF and not Ethiopia?
You talked about the importance of having a national army and how that needs to be built if we need to transition from AMSOM to a Somali national army. So the question is, a lot of people are asking, well, but the whole national army isn't really a national army. It's a bunch of militia that is like more trusting of their own warlords rather than the government. So could you say a little bit about what you think of that and how you think that could be dealt with?
It's Mohammed Mahmoud. Number one, thank you for you articulated your research, and your article was wonderful. And we hope that we take the items which contains it to the nation at large. My question is to the Ambassador David Sheen. You really talking a lot about what's going on, but one thing we know that that Somali people fought and killed each other, and no real reconciliation has taken place. So in that case, there is no trust between them. So, and your conclusion of the speech was we need a national army. How can we build a national army if we don't have a trust between the Somalis at large? And others are saying that we are not in Somalia, we are Somaliland. Thank you.
And I will give to
Here, my name is Hodan Hassan. I'm part of the IHASA crew that decided to ruin your Saturday and just bring you all here. My question is for all the panels. I don't know who wants to answer this question. The issue in Somalia, or the issue in Horn of Africa is interconnected. We know that about a month ago what happened in Kenya. It could happen in Ethiopia. It has been happening in Somalia. So what I would like to know is what would be the approach for the international communities to fight with Al-Shabaab and terrorism in Somalia or in the Horn of Africa. And the question I had was really
I should have asked earlier, but I'm going to ask anyways. Because we're talking about reconciliation and the Somali problem itself, a country that comes to mind that I haven't heard in the discussions and the presentation is Rwanda. The Hutsis versus the Tutsis, it rings a bell in my head. And what I'm trying to figure out is, from anyone who presented, why hasn't there been a case study comparison and contrast with Somali's issue? Thank you.
I'm honored to be here and honored to meet the panelists. My question is kind of a question, but at the same time I'm trying to figure out. I have been trying to figure out why Oslo and other organizations are coming to Minneapolis to talk to the diaspora, but at the same time I'm trying to figure out. You know, we all come together, we talk about things, and then we close that door and that's it, and then we come back and go from there. So, what is the main point of coming? I do understand that we have a lot to contribute in terms of the Somali diaspora in not only in the Twin Cities but abroad. But that's one thing. The second thing is when we go back to Somalia. As people who have been educated in the American system or in the European system have totally different way of saying how things should happen. And so when we go back to Somalia, we're dealing with people who have been in the conflict for more than 20-something years. And so then when we come back to sit and talk about issues, we don't see things in the same perspective. And that creates a lot of issues and disconnected. So how, especially Oslo, can bridge that gap between diaspora and the community back home?
Final question. Friends, also the distinguished panels that you bring. My question is goes to the center. You have seen that many of us have raised concern about the role and the approach that you have taken in Somalia. And I don't think it is the way we take away from your presentation. If you look at your PowerPoint presentation, you indicated that you will engage in all stakeholders in Somalia. At the same time, you are only dealing with Mogadishu, which is not doesn't represent all stakeholders. At the same time, you said that you will go into the Sudan, other countries, without mentioning that you will go other states in Somalia, Puntland and Somalia. So that is where our concern comes. The ambassador, I would like to ask one question, the ambassador. The reference that you made in Kismayo, someone have already asked you that question, and I'm sure that you will revisit. But my question that I would like to ask you is the way you view how Somalia will reconstruct in terms of the relationship between regions and the Mogadishu, especially Puntland and federal government, where the constitution that they have signed is not from the Puntland's perspective, is not the real constitution that DFD is using now.
So we'll let our distinguished speakers to respond in summary. If you can give each speaker, shall we say 3 minutes? I think you get the spirit of what I'm trying to...
My direction anyway. A few of them overlapped, and I'll try to summarize, but there's a lot of material there. Starting with the international community, this is part of the problem. Sure, it's part of the problem. Has been going back to at least 1991, if not before. International communities made plenty of mistakes in Somalia, and I think in many instances it would be the first to acknowledge some of those mistakes. I was involved with the international intervention in Somalia in 1993, and goodness knows mistakes were made during that period when the issue was warlords. It wasn't al-Shabaab, and particularly Mohammed Farah Aidid and the relationship between him and the international community. The only thing I can say is I think that the international community has learned a little bit over the years, and its mistakes are generally less severe now than they were earlier. The main thing, in my view, is that it's time to let Somalis drive this process. And I think the biggest mistake the international community can make at this point is to try to do too much micromanaging of the process, and that's my fear, that sometimes they still are too engaged in the details and they need to back off. On the issue of Kismayo and the charcoal trade, where I was fairly critical of Kenya, all of that comes right out of the July 2013 UN monitoring report on Somalia, and it's in great detail. Maybe if you don't like the term Ras Kamboni militia, I apologize for that, but you know what I'm talking about in any event. The other point is that it is the Kenyan forces in Kismayo that are allowing that charcoal trade to go forward, and they inherited a huge stockpile of charcoal that al-Shabaab had assembled and lost after they lost the city. And the Kenyans and the Ras Kamboni crowd went ahead and sold it all. And they're continuing to sell it. And not only that, but some of the al-Shabaab sympathizers are still in Kismayo and they're involved in the trade. They're making money off of it and they're giving the money to al-Shabaab. So there's something wrong with this movie picture, and something needs to be fixed here. And the Kenyans, I think, ultimately are responsible for fixing it. There was a question about why I focused on Kenya and not Ethiopia. I'm not sure I fully understood the question, but my focus was on AMISOM and the future of it, the past, the development of it. Ethiopia has never been part of AMISOM, so because it's not part of AMISOM, it wasn't an important part of what I discussed, except I was critical of Ethiopia for going into Mogadishu back in, the end of 2006, the beginning of 2007. And I'm on the record at that time as having said that was a mistake. And I still think that was a big mistake by Ethiopia. A couple of you talked about the difficulty of getting the Somali National Army stood up as a true national army. And you're absolutely right. This is a huge problem. But this is the problem that has to be overcome. And I think it can be overcome. Initially, it may require simply knitting together the various militias that are sympathetic to where the central government is heading, trying to use them as best they can in an organized way. And maybe it'll be 5 years, 10 years before it becomes, quote, a real true Somali National Army. All I can say is that Somalia once had a very proud army and an even prouder police force. Somalia had one of the best police forces in Africa at one time and one of the most professional. So if it was done once, I think it can be done again, but it's going to require a lot of work, and I don't want to understate how hard it's going to be to do. The comment was made, there's no trust among Somalis as you build the national army, and you're quite right, you have to build trust. The trust has to be there. That's got to be part of the process. That's why I go back to the idea of the government has to focus on providing services to the people, and you have the old chicken and the egg problem. Which comes first, security or providing services? Well, they both have to go forward at the same time. You provide services in those parts of Somalia where it can now be done. And the word will get out that certain parts of Somalia are benefiting, and that will, I think, undercut the al-Shabaab effort in areas where they control. There was a question about the international community and counterterrorism in Somalia. I'm not sure I got the full gist of the question. I would only say in response that this does continue to be a key part, certainly, of American policy in Somalia. It's a component where I think mistakes have been made in recent years. I think that in the last couple of years, the U.S. approach has been somewhat more intelligent, and even the failed raid at Barawe a couple of weeks ago was not a disaster for the United States. It failed. The raid failed. It did not catch who they were trying to catch. And they obviously had poor intelligence, or they wouldn't have had to leave so quickly. There were far more civilians intermingled among the al-Shabaab people than they anticipated, but that's all bad intelligence. But remember, what it did do is that al-Shabaab will never know when there may be the next raid by U.S. Special Forces, and the next time they might get the guy they're looking for. So it does keep al-Shabaab off balance. Why was there not a comparison of Rwanda and Somalia? Well, I suppose you could ask that question about 100 different things that we didn't talk about. We've only had an afternoon, and that's not something I would normally do in any event. My own view is that there are a lot of differences between what happened in Somalia and what happened in Rwanda. As bad as things have been in Somalia, I think they were 10 times worse in Rwanda. Nevertheless, there are some similarities there. The question is, why come to Minneapolis to meet with the diaspora? Well, two reasons. One, you're the biggest Somali community in the United States, and this is where the conferences are. The only other options really are Columbus, Ohio, maybe Seattle, Washington. That's about it in terms of a critical mass of Somali Americans or a Somali community. So if this is where HAMSA is going to come to hold the conference and invite us, this is where we come. We're not going to go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And the last one that I will comment on, how will Somalia reconstruct relations with entities like Somalia and Puntland? Another big dilemma, a real problem. I think in the case, it's a little easier to answer that in the case of Somaliland than Puntland. I think in effect, there's sort of a modus vivendi, or a truce, if you will, between Hargeisa and Mogadishu, where they're both still going down their separate paths, but they both left the door ajar for some future talks at some point. I've had close contact with Somalilanders over the years, and the Somalilanders will always say, why should we even consider joining with that mess down to the south of us? Well, until a year or so ago, that was a perfectly legitimate answer. There was nothing to join with. Even today, there are lots of problems in Somalia, and the Somalilanders can still say, the time's not right yet to be considered joining. But I don't think the Somaliland has closed the door on some sort of a future relationship with Mogadishu. Puntland, a little more difficult to deal with, and I think I'm going to turn that one over to my colleagues.
Thank you again for the comments. Valid. I understand.
I think it's on, right? No, it's not on yet. I have to hold it a bit.
Okay. Yeah? Okay. Thank you again for the comments and questions. I recognize that Somalia is more than Mogadishu. We have been engaged also in the Puntland process with the election commission there and so forth. But as we are a small center of 9 staff, we are very happy with opening an office close to in Mogadishu with the coordinator close on the ground there as a start. That doesn't say that we are not thinking of also supporting on a more broadly regional geographical basis. So I bring that note with me to our organization. When it comes to how to help in terms of the diaspora and the Somalis living in Somalia, I think that is a very internal issue. I think dialogue is one way of approaching it. I think open up forums where people are able to speak and be able to express their opinions. I don't think that we as internationals can do much more than facilitate space. It's really an issue that has to be worked out internally.
Thank you for saying that, because that really is what it is. The international community is going to facilitate, and the work needs to be done by Somalis. Somalis need to come and actually sort this mess that they started. Human security from theory to practice, I think everything has a theoretical contextual pieces, and it depends on those who are familiar with the context to really apply it. So it's up to Somalis, and particularly the Somali elite, to start articulating these things and not just sitting back and watching things. So I would say a fundamental paradigm shift needs to happen in the way we actually see these things, how we think about security, but also a leadership that can actually seek and get legitimacy from the people. You know, we can stop the bloodletting and say, let's select somebody for now to stop the chaos and maybe move towards something. But at the end of the day, I think, and Faisal has captured in his research, even the military dictatorship, even in the 9 years of the civilian government, we have not had a government with genuine legitimacy from the people, by the people. And it's not easy, and I might be a dreamer, but I think the leadership needs to start thinking like that. And then start asking people what they want. And I'm sure the mother in the Dab refugee camp is going to tell them it's about the security that is not about bringing more guns and boots on the ground. But it's about how do I raise my kid and not have the fear now of children being co-opted in the name of religion. They have been co-opted in the name of clan. Now it's happening with religion. So I think Isha waxa inoo yeelay waa national army. I think we need to think about a national peace department for once. We need to think about building peace and peace-building army. Really, Abdurrazak Haji Hussein, somebody we all respect, talks about the fact that we really don't need a military. What we need is police force to keep the law and do internal. We don't really need to build. We once had the best army in the continent, and look what it got us. It got us having ammunition from everywhere. There was a question about how would Somalis reconstruct from all these pieces, and I think that's a bigger conversation than this. But the issues of the Horn being interconnected, I agree with you, Hodan, and how would the international community fight Al-Shabaab? I think Al-Shabaab is a Somali phenomenon, and Somalis need to fight Al-Shabaab for once. And we need to really, because that's, we need to start talking to these people and addressing the global jihadi movement has no business in Somalia. Because back in 1993, Al-Ittihad did not gain traction in Somalia because people thought, things will go back to normal. I'm not buying this craziness of extremism. But 20 years of abject poverty and conflict, our kids are up for hire. The highest bidder, and the highest bidder in town is linked to Al-Qaeda. Guess what? The kids are being co-opted into it. I will feed your mother and father, come blow yourself up. The most poor of the poor are the ones that are being, and then the confused ones from the diaspora, right? Who couldn't really integrate in the diaspora well and are confused about many things. And that is our job, to try and talk to these kids and reframe Islam for what it is, which is a religion of peace. So yeah, we are interconnected regionally, and we need to do that. The Rwanda Tutsi Hutu issues, as dire and bad, and really we haven't done that to one another, maybe close. They were also fortunate to have leadership that really closed rank immediately, sort of, because I remember talking to the Prosecutor General from Kigali in somewhere in Ireland, Human Rights Institute, and I asked him that question, what is the difference? And he said it's a question of leadership. And today, I would agree with him. Then I was a bit confused about the leadership thing. But it is, they closed rank, and as much as firm whatever hand that Kagame has on Rwanda, Rwanda is becoming a success story under Kagame's leadership. So it becomes a question of leadership. In the comparison things, I don't think we have that clear cut who the perpetrator is, who the victim is in Somalia. It's messier than that. because the perpetrators and the victims have shifted places several times, and the bystanders became perpetrators themselves. So we have a much more messier things to I guess, sort out, and I'll stop there.
IHASA committee member, conference committee members, and I want to acknowledge Muhammad Kainan, Umar Jubba, Horan, and Mustafa for really putting a lot of hours to organize this conference. Like I said, it's not easy to put something like this together, and without you guys it would not have been possible as well. So these 4 individuals have been nominated either by a IHASA member, a board member, or a IHASA conference committee member. And the 4 categories are Media Award, and we have a Community Service Award, IHASA Distinguished Award, and Outstanding Student Award. The commonality in all 4 awards is that these are individuals who have demonstrated exceptional leadership and service to the Horn of Africa community. And I know you guys cannot wait me to mention the names. I will start with the Media Award, and the Media Award for the 2013 goes to someone that for the past 20 years have really, like I said, spent most of his life contributing both time-wise and monetary-wise, and providing technical assistance not only to the media that is affiliated with, but also other media that's both local and international. And that's IHASA. We thank Siad for all of his contributions, and we wish you the best. Our next award goes to, it's the IHASA Distinguished Award, and that goes to someone who provides not only in-kind office space to IHASA, but has also demonstrated exceptional leadership and service to the work that IHASA and many other organizations are involved in. That's peace building, good governance, and economic integration in the Horn of Africa. And that award for the 2013 goes to Mustafa Hassan.
Congratulations.
The third award goes to the award category is Community Service Award, and we have a Somali brother who is from Djibouti, but the Djiboutians always say, we thought you were from the Somalia proper because you spend more time in Somalia affairs than Djibouti affairs, and his response was, Somalia needs our time now. He has been in community service, and the award goes to Abdurrahman Kahin. I also would like to mention that Abdurrahman Kahin provided our sambusa and refreshment today. And I would like to do actually a little advertisement for Afro Day. Afro Day has been on the Wall Street Journal, it has been on the New York Times as one of the best restaurants in town. So kudos to Last but not least, the award goes to the Outstanding Student Award goes to a young student who just graduated from high school and has been accepted to college. She's the first person in her family to go to college. Not only is she an outstanding student academically, but she has also been quite active in the community, helping her peers and other students of junior and elementary school grades, and she spends more time, as I said, really helping out and being there for her community. And that award goes to Zamzam Ahmed. waxaan aad idinka mahadcelinayaa taankiina qaaliga so waxaan aad idinka mahadcelinayaa mar kale taankiina qaaliga just to spend 2 more minutes on what we have accomplished today. Not only have we discussed issues, but we will be publishing the conference proceedings in 6 months from this conference. So you have contributed not only in today's conference, but what we hope to be a long-lasting contribution to the discourse that's taking place in non-profit. xilligeena qaaliga ay maanta halkan geliseen maaha keliya inaad shirkii aad ku maaragtay waxayseen, laakiin waxay aad iyo aad qayb uga qaadateen maaragtay qoraalka buugga la soo qorayo. waxaan jeclaan lahaa inaad u mahadceliyo last but not least Somali Journal oo mar walba meel kastoo aynu joogno caawiya diyaarna waa inay idin joogo